Hello, let me tell you something awesome if you want to start a podcast and you don't have the funds to do so. And if you haven't heard of Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. And it has everything you need in one place. Let me explain. Anchor has tools that allows you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Easy to use. If I can use it, anybody can use it. Also, when hosting on Anchor, you get to distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more, and which is something you don't have to do nothing. Anchor does everything for you. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place, and best of all, Anchor is totally free. Check it out right now. Start a podcast. I cannot wait to hear you speak.
Hello, welcome to Truck Stop Murder, True Crime Podcast. I am Gary Howard in your murder edition, where I cover all the executed inmates from 1976 on to present day, if I can. There's sure is a lot of them, and I talk about what they did and everything like that. So if you're a return listener, thank you for tuning in. If you're a new listener, but yeah, that's what I do on this episode here is talk about executed inmate from 1976 on, because they ended the death penalty in the United States because they consider it cruel and unusual punishment from 72, I believe, to 76, which I'm going to be covering. Right now I'm in 83. There's only like 5 of them. But 84 is going to be a boom. It's like 21. After that, it just keeps more and more and more. But as always, I always encourage you all, if you like what you listen to, help me build this so I can do this full time and be able to do my full 3 episodes a week. I want to do this on Mondays, my regular episode with truck stops on Wednesdays, and then I'm going to do Missing Unsolved on Friday. That's what my plan is. But being a truck driver, it's not always that easy to do that. I got to research and whatnot. But here I am. I'm going to try to do it. As of right now, I was going to do this truck stop, but I'm saving this truck stop because I do have a case I'm going to cover that's nearby here that happened by this truck stop. That it occurred yesterday was the day that she went missing. I mean, it was solved later on, but it was in Ocala, Georgia, where it happened. And I'm in Douglas, Georgia. I've been stuck here for the weekend because my company can't find a load for me. I could go on and on about what I think's going on, but you're not here to listen to that. And I know Desiree don't like me bullshitting, so let's get to the case. And Desiree's my wife, by the way. Jimmy Lee Gray. Before I start, trigger warning. This does involve the murder of a 3-year-old and a 16-year-old girl. So if you're bothered by that, and I struggle to think about doing this, but it doesn't. The only thing that I decided I would not do, in which I'm struggling right now, thinking about doing one case, but a parent who brutalizes their own kid and tortures, I can't. But this is in the line of the death penalty, so there you go. But we're talking, like I said, Jimmy Lee Gray. I can't find too much about him. There are few besides there was a botched execution. But is it really a botched execution if the end state is death? Especially what he did to these 2 girls. How is it botched? But then again, does that make us evil monsters like them? I don't know. Let's talk about Jimmy Lee Gray. Was born on 1949 in Whittier, Whittier, California. At age 18, Jimmy murdered his girlfriend, Elda Louise Prince. 16-year-old Elda was a sophomore at Parker High School in Parker, Arizona, where Jimmy was also a student and a school friend of Elda's brother, 18-year-old Irvin. The Prince family had made Jimmy welcome in their house, even helped out buying him clothes. They also took him to ball games and on fishing trips. On the day of the murder, January 5th, 1968, Elda was to leave school early for a doctor's appointment, and her mother, Opal, was going to the doctor's office to pick her up at 4:30. The receptionist told that Elda had not shown up, so Opal went home, presuming that her daughter had caught the school bus as usual. When they arrived without her, Opal called the police and reported. When the bus arrived without her, Opal called the police and reported her daughter missing. Jimmy went with the princess to the sheriff's office and later that evening to help search for Elda. The sheriff was suspicious of Jimmy, having noticed his shoes and under question was dirty, And under questioning, wonder why. Why is your shoes all muddy? What's going on here? And under questioning the following day, the lead deputies to a he led the deputy. Why can't I talk? They led the deputies to a culvert near the Colorado River and showed them where he had dumped her body. So yeah, he just gave in to us. If you will find out even on the second murder, he doesn't take too much for him to cave in and confess to his crimes. The shoes patterns exactly match the prints at the crime scene. Examinations showed that Elda had been strangled and had her throat cut before being thrown into the cupboard. It appears that Jimmy and Elda met after school and they walked home and they had quarreled over something about his sexual impotency, I heard. I don't know what, if he had because she says he had a small dick or couldn't keep it up long, or I don't know, couldn't satisfy her, but he got pissed off about it and he killed her. Eldo was kind of like a Chikatilo, I guess. Eldo was buried in the Cottonwood Cemetery on the 11th of January. Jimmy was convicted only of second degree murder and received. Here's where people get really pissed off after what happens on, later on. He only received a sentence of 20 years to life. Sadly, he was released on parole after 6 years, despite the protest of the trial judge, who regarded him as a dangerous individual. How right he would be proved. So yeah, that was the first murder. The second murder. Now, as first back to the first murder, keep in mind what kind of person he was. This family brung him into their house, bought him clothes, and then how they return them, their gratitude, gratitude is to kill their daughter. But yeah, but the second murder, nothing much was heard of Jimmy until June 25th, 1976. After release from prison, he had moved first to California and later to Mississippi. On that day, okay, get ready. This is when I was talking about the 3-year-old. If you don't want to listen to the rest of this or fast forward about 5 minutes or so, then I'll be okay with it. Or if you just want to skip this whole episode altogether, this is not for you. I'll put another one out next Monday. I'm gonna try to. But on that day, 3-year-old Teresa Jean Scales disappeared from her parents' apartment in Pascola, Mississippi. They reported he disappearance to the police around 5 p.m. that afternoon. Jimmy lived in the same apartment complex as the Scales and was questioned by police after his neighbors mentioned that they had seen Teresa with a man with a red Volkswagen. Oh, that's the ambulance. I thought I heard the sirens going off. I was wondering what it was. There's an ambulance driving by, and was questioned. Can you hear that? Okay, maybe. But I record all my episodes in my truck, so there you go. I'm not in no studio or nothing. I have to set up and tear this thing down. So where you hear me from is recorded in my Freightliner. So some guy just walked out the gas station looking at me crazy. I got my windows open, shades open. So yeah, back to the story. Jimmy lived in the same apartment complex as the Scales and was questioned by police after neighbors mentioned they had seen Teresa with a man with a red Volkswagen car whom they identified as living in the apartments. When Jimmy showed up in the car, police noted that the lower legs of his jeans were wet, kind of like the first member when the police noticed it was muddy, which he explained by his having he has been swimming in the complex pool in his pants. Under question, he admitted to them that he had taken Teresa for a ride in the country and that on a back road he touched the little girl. He claimed that she had wandered off and fallen into a shallow ditch. He rescued her from the ditch, but put her still breathing in the trunk of his car, which never made sense to me. Then he began his homeward bound, stopping on a bridge over Black Creek, where he removed Teresa from the trunk and threw her in the water below. So, which don't make no sense to me. Once again, he led the police to the crime scene at 3:30 a.m. the following morning, which don't make no sense to me. He said he was trying to help her, but then again, he also dumped her. None of that makes no sense. So the medical examiner found that what pisses me off about all that is, it all pisses me off anyhow, but what puts the icing on the cake is You know how he lured her in the car with kittens? He said, "You want to go see some kittens?" And of course, I mean, someone told me I'm a 52-year-old man, and I have a lot of cats in my house. So if somebody asked me, "Do you want to see kittens?" I'd be like, "I'm in." That evil. The medical examiner found that Teresa had been gagged. Well, this well, I don't gagged, sodomized. Her underpants was forced down her throat, and finally suffocated by being held face down in the mud of the ditch. Monster. So once you see what I'm talking about, now that you know what he did, what happens to him later on, you'd be like, good, fuck you, some bitch. That's what you get. Mud was found in her that she had inhaled. So let's talk about trial. So yeah, second murder. Should have been in jail for the first murder, but Arizona did not do their job well and let him go. So, Jimmy came to trial in Pascagoula on December 13th, 1976, before Judge Merrill, charged with first-degree murder and sodomy. Once again, shoe prints would help convict the killer, and chemical analysis would show the presence of semen in the little girl's body. Although at the time DNA was not sufficiently advanced and able to be linked to Jimmy, it took juries just an hour to convict Jimmy, and he was then sentenced to death in a gas chamber. This is our first gas chamber one I've done. Covered fire squads, electric chairs, and lethal injections. Now, first gas chamber. Jimmy's mandatory appeal to Mississippi Supreme Court reversed the original verdict and gave him a new trial in 1978 when Jimmy was allowed to address the jury. For some reason, address the jury on his own behalf. However, they were not impressed and reached the same verdict. Both juries recommended the death penalty at the conclusion of the sentencing phase, as the victim's age and sodomization were aggravating factors. In 1970, which I think anybody who doesn't, even if murder's not involved, if you do anything to that just, I have a 10-year-old right now. If you rape her, tell you what, death penalty. But a 3-year-old, I think rape should be death penalty. Here's another question. Hopefully, somebody answers me. Should we put rape in with as a well? I guess in Texas, if you do murder them, that is an aggravator. But just rape itself, should rape be considered a death penalty? I think so, because you may not have physically murdered her, but you have mentally murdered her. How many rape victims out there who are, you could say, is the same person before the rape they are after the rape? I mean, death is not just physical; it could be mentally. You know, what I'm saying, their life is over; they'll never be the same person they once was. So let me hear any comments on my Facebook group, Truck Stop Murder True, or any of my social medias. I'll give it at the end. Well, yep, 1909. The same court upheld the verdict and sentence from the second trial. Further, almost a second degree murder. No, second trial. Further appeals followed, including one based on the cruelty of execution by lethal gas, in which the Sixth Circuit setting in New Orleans granted a stay of execution in July of 1983, hours before he was due to be executed. Parchment's prison chaplain, Reverend Ronald Paget, told reporters that Jimmy was relieved and pleased with the decision. Mississippi Governor William Winter refused clemency, and there's a picture of him here now thinking that he's going to get free. But guess what? No, I'll put that picture on social media. On September 1st, 1983, Supreme Court dismissed Jimmy's final appeal in a 6-3 decision, so clearing the way for his execution. The following day, Friday, September 2nd, 1983, at the Mississippi State Penitentiary, Chief Justice Warren B. Berger said, "This case illustrates the recent pattern of calculated efforts to frustrate." Let me start again. This case illustrates the recent pattern of calculated efforts to frustrate valid judgment after painstaking judicial reviews over a number of years. At some point, there must be finality. I mean, it needs to be over with. It's taking too long. Mississippi State Penitentiary is generally known as Parchman, after its first warning, J.M. Parchman, if you want to know some useful information. One of Jimmy's spiritual advisors, Reverend Joseph Ingall, stated at the time that Jimmy should not be executed because he was a devout Christian. Oh, sounds like someone else in Texas, don't you? Devout Christian who committed crimes. He is a sensitive, caring, and humorous person. Humorous. Humorous. I want to focus on Jimmy's humility because I am sick and tired of hearing about the crime. Well, how about them two girls' families? I bet you they'd like to hear from their daughters. So fuck you. And about 8:30 p.m. on the Thursday evening, Jimmy received Holy Communion from several ministers. According to prison officials, he had earlier had a final meal. Here you go, of Mexican food like burritos, enchiladas, and stuff like that, and strawberries and milk. Another question for y'all: what do y'all think of final meals? I think if you could prove that if you kill somebody, you gave them an opportunity to a final meal, so be it. You gave them one. Well, I don't think them two girls got final meals, so why should he? So, 3 hours before the execution, members of the Mississippi Coalition Against the Death Penalty, of course, had a peaceful candlelight protest outside the gates of the prison and outside of the governor's mansion in Jackson, which, of course, they will show up. Now, let's go on to his execution. At 12:01 Central Daylight Time, Warden Eden Lucas gave the order to staff to commence the execution procedures. At 12:08, Jimmy was brought into a 20-foot by 12-foot white painted execution room wearing a red death row jumpsuit, strapped in the gas chamber, and perforated steel chair with his head with the head of the bolus stethoscope taped to his chest. I guess that's where he could hear the heartbeat. The heavy door was closed and sealed at 12:12. The gas was released from Mississippi's executioner T. Barry Bruce, operated the lever to lower the cyanide pellets into the vat of sulfuric acid below the seat of the death penalty. So I guess it's like a turn, there's capsules, it turns around, drops in it, and it activates it, which brings me to, let's go, little side story. Kind of reminds me when I was in the Army, what they do with CS gas. If anybody, military listeners, and you know what I'm talking about. They take you in that room and they got like the hot plate. They just put the capsules on it and tell you to take your mask off and good. Well, at least they're not. We're doing stuff for cyanide. But tell you what, it's not fun. Back to the story. At this time, the head restraint shown in the photo. There's a photo of it. I'll put on that on social media too. There was no head restraint, so his head was just freely to go about, but the metal pole behind the chair was there. 15 officials, including journalists, watched the execution and noted 11 gasps, followed by moans and a single loud groan. Jimmy appeared to gulp down the gas as he had no doubt been instructed to do to hasten, try to hurry up to death, try to breathe as much as you can. Where a lot of people will hold their breath for as long as they can and finally give in. He strained against restraining straps and his head slumped forward and violently backwards, hitting the metal pole, which shook with such force as to rattle the whole apparatus. So he's just banging his head against this thing. So the exact time of death is disputed. So some people say one thing, some people say another thing. Prison officials claim that Jimmy suffered cardiac arrest at 12:15 a.m. But the witnesses saw that he was still gasping for breath and convulsing 8 minutes later when they were asked to leave the witness area, according to the executive log. All movement had apparently ceased at 12:21 a.m., 9 minutes after execution began. His attorney, Dennis Balske, told reporters Jimmy had suffered a painful death. Well, good for you, Jimmy. Glad. Like I said, back to them two girls. Well, imagine what they did, what they went through. Especially a 3-year-old. She don't know nothing about that. So a gold color hearse took Jimmy's body to a funeral home in Indianapolis, Indianola, about 40 miles away. It had been claimed by a Natchez church group that had befriended him and was buried in an undisclosed plot, so we don't know where he's buried at. And I will give where these girls are buried at after I get done with the story. But yeah, this would be the second execution in the U.S. since '83 and the eighth since the Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality. And there you go. You can laugh about that, Ezra. Of capital punishment, 1976. Mississippi previously execution had been Tim Jackson by lethal gas on May 1st, 1964. So it's been a while for rape and murder. Same thing. Three more men would die in that gas chamber. And of course, we will get into all that in the future when I get there. And of course, let's talk about Jimmy's mom. The one who kicked him out knew that he was trouble. Jimmy's mom, Berta Smith, who was living in California, urged the state of Mississippi to execute Sonny. She said, "You need to kill that son of a bitch." Said he should have been never released from the first time. Ministers, social workers, and lawyers who got to know him on death row described Jimmy as being a born again Christian, Carla Faye Tucker, kind of like, and spoke to him as a sensitive, shy, gentle, and bright and troubled. Let's just see one more person, Richard J. Doris's father told reporters, "I'm glad he's gone." This is the father of the victim. "I'm glad he's gone." Wait, let's start again. Father told reporters, "I'm glad it happened. It should have happened years ago." Of course, even in prison, he had been able to talk, to breathe, and to laugh, and he had taken all those things away from my little girl. He didn't even have the right to continue living. So yeah, and Opal Prince, oldest mom, remember her? Hail his execution as our big day. "I put better dogs to sleep than that man," she said. Said Mrs. Prince, who was the director of rabies and animal control in Mohave County. She told reporters that the execution is overdue. It should have been done in 1968 in Arizona, which is true. That capital murder punishment. I mean, yeah, was still there. Capital, yeah, was still there. I thought I said corporal. Was still in effect in 1968. So now, if it was drug out, it might have extended into 72, 73 and committed to. It could have been life without parole. But we're going to see what happens to somebody. I'm planning on covering that. He did get the death penalty. When in 72 they got rid of it, and he ended up getting parole. We'll talk about him soon. She said, "I know I came on hard, but this is a hard thing with all the jail overcrowding. Let's get back to him. There you go. Jail overcrowding. Let's get rid of the people like him and make room for the people who can be rehabilitated." One more person, UPI reporter Don Losser, Lowasser, who had witnessed the gassing. Afterwards, said afterwards, "I thought I had some pretty hard bark on me from being in Vietnam, but I was pretty shook up about that." So yeah, it was definitely a box execution. But you know what? I don't care. The outcome is still the same. Am I a barbaric monster for thinking so? Maybe. But look what he did to two innocent girls. One, their family helped him out, bought him clothes when he was in time of need, and then the 3-year-old lured her kittens. That's horrible. Okay, so if you want to pay respect to Elda Louise Prince, she was born November 8th, 1951. She was murdered January 5th, 1968 in Arizona. And if you want to pay respects to her, go to Cottonwood Cemetery, 1943 North Main Street, Cottonwood, I'm not going to say Yavapai, Yavapai, but it's in Cottonwood, Arizona. Let me see if it has the number. Nope. You'll find there's her picture there. You can see what she looks like. So I'll post on my social medias. And if you want to see where the other girls' memorial, you want to pay respect, you go to all these are on Find a Grave, where you can also leave virtual flowers, like most people do. Now, her father passed away in 2011, Harold Franklin Prince, and her mom passed away in 2002. Now, she had a sibling that passed away in 2008. As for Dorisa Jean Scales, she was born June 8th, 1973, murdered on June 25th, 1976, at age 3. She is Serene, Serene Memorial Gardens in Moss Point, Mississippi. Her memorial ID is 914. Let's start again. 914-50894, which I'll have pictures on these on my social media as well. So I would say if you enjoyed it, which I didn't enjoy telling it, but if you enjoyed me telling of the story, go to or right anywhere you're listening to this at, or you also can join Patreon. Right now, I only have one Patreon, a Full Metal Jackalope. I want to start be able to put bonus episodes out. I'm pretty busy with what I have right now to put episodes out to deaf ears, but I promise if I get one Patreon at $5, even at $1. Actually, the $1 I have right now is my wife, so I talked to her about it. So if I could get one Patreon at $1, $5, or $10, of course, if $10, you get the amazing drinking mug made by Mrs. Kruger. Is it Freddy Krueger's wife? Is it someone else's Kruger's wife? Well, I guess you'll find out. But you'll get an awesome Truck Stop Murder traveling mug. $5 you get bonus episodes. At $1, I'm going to put bonus episodes on the $1 tier too. I just haven't figured out what. But yeah, do that. Or if you don't want to be a Patreon, PayPal me at truckstopmurder@gmail.com on PayPal. Also, you could join my Facebook group. I'm trying to get people to talk, but it's been pretty quiet there lately. That's the Truck Stop Murder True Crime Podcast, Truck Stop Murder True Crime. My Instagram is also at Truck Stop Murder True Crime, and Twitter is a Truck Murder. And you can email me at truckstopmurdergmail@gmail.com. All right, then. Well, until next Monday, I'll see you later. I'm out of here. But, like I always say before I leave, you can't fix stupid, but you can sure numb it with a 2x4.
Huh?